Hey guys, Jarretman here. Back with some more poker. Picking up from where we left off in the last video, the 500 Zoom pool died, so we are playing some normal tables until it comes back to life. This table here on the right isn't the greatest table, starting conditions. I don't think that I have an edge at this table, but we can play some for the video. Why not? The other option is 200 Zoom, which I might put in. We'll play a few orbits of this table at least. And A7 suited versus this 3-bet size, I believe will fold. Cutoff versus big blind. Just have one hand of Zoom going on my other monitor before I'm trying to close this table out. So my hand will raise or call on table 1. I think it's a low frequency raise, high frequency call. So on a 63, we will go for the call. Not going to lead on this turn. Not exactly sure what to do here on table 1. I think it's very close. I know versus a small bet obviously will continue. Versus big bet, this one might have been a small mistake. So I didn't see the flop action here, but I think it went. Now what's going on? He called the small blind, I guess. He called the small blind. Flop went bet raise call. I'm not exactly sure. So we have to have a decent amount of checkbacks on table 2, only because of the way that the ranges work. Because we have such a junky range. What happened here? I misread this spot, didn't I? I was the small blind. Okay, that makes more sense. So he called the big blind. Flop went bet raise call. Okay, that's what I thought. And now we're going to check back on table 2. And call a river bet. Unless he goes all in. If he goes all in, I think we will mainly fold. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm just going to fold. So table 1, again, it's one of those pick your poison boards where big better check makes a lot of sense. 1/3 with range makes a lot of sense. 1/3 or check, half or check, anything seems fine. So this hand might even, on table 2, might in theory be a pure call. I am going to fold it though. And on table 1, we're going to check back. Check back with a decent amount of showdown value. And then on the river ace, do we bluff my hand? do we have lots? So we have like hands like Jack 7 suited, Jack 8 suited that didn't bet the turn. However, those do bet the turn a decent amount. He can still have a 4, so I think we'll always bluff 3s and 2s. And then I think 5s is really close. He can have 6s and 7s and 8s that can fold, and 9s. We block ace 5 of diamonds, yeah. It's the fold a 10-9 sometimes too, I think. That one's kind of close. So this hand here, it goes bet, raise, relatively small, call. Barrel for 1/3, yep, seems fine. If you start barreling for too big, it starts to get too thin with some of the hands in your range. And then he rivers a flush and decides to check, which again seems fine. And then Yusuf overbets, which seems reasonable as well. You definitely have hands that want to overbet in that line. Doing a lot of checking back on table 1 on this board, on mono boards in general. This hand can bet or check. Now the turn, I'll admit, I'm a little lost. And I'm just thinking, does this hand want to go for 1 street and then check back? Does it want to go for 2 streets? I think I'm going to play 1 size and just going to size half, allowing myself to bet some hands that aren't flushes for value, I guess. Yeah, when Yusuf goes for the overbet on the river here, he's no longer saying he has a 9, really. He's saying he has a flush. He's saying he has a flush or better. Potentially a straight. I mean, he has the easiest check call of all time on the river after he checks. Should pay attention to what's going on here. So he was cut off and he's small blind, and this was a 3-bet pot, and then I guess he checked the flop. So yeah, having a checking range on this flop is pretty reasonable. Despite it being king high, it's also very connected, very dynamic. As the small blind 3-better, you don't have a lot of 6s and 5s. You don't have a lot of pocket 6s and pocket 5s. The cutoff definitely has an advantage in that. The cutoff even has low frequency hands like king 6 suited, potentially even king 5 suited, depending on what ranges. And a lot of your range is hands like pocket queens, pocket jacks, pocket 10s, ace queen. And then the hands that want to check call are going to be a lot of the hands that I just described. So a hand like jacks or queens obviously is going to go into the check call. You will have some king X to check call. In general, your range is going to be very unbalanced when you check here, and that's okay. That's allowed. You're not going to have a lot of strong hands in your check call range, and that's perfectly fine. So all that considered, the cutoff gets to barrel a lot on almost every turn. And the small blind's in a really tough spot. The hands that would check call the flop and fold the turn are some of the same hands that we discussed before, like pairs. Some are gonna have to mix folds on the turn now. I think hands like ace queen, ace jack, hands like that. Hand like ace 5 maybe. Check call flop, check fold turn. It's a very interesting spot when we're looking at this turn from the small blinds perspective. So on table 1, we're going to do both. On 84, we're going to 4-bet. Table just keeps getting better and better. Now we have big blind bets here. Next, I hope Linus sits down. Then we have a really good game. You know what they say when you can't find the sucker at the table within your first couple orbits. It's not looking good for me, is it? So I think 150 big blinds deep, this hand doesn't want to get 3-bet. So interesting, Davey decides to go for the large bet on the king 8-7 flush draw board. I do think it's a good strategy. I think that if you decide to go for a small bet strategy, you have to have checkbacks regardless. 10-20 rake, I think king 2 off is very close. I can't remember actually. I know with unraked, it gets in there. And 10-20 is basically unraked. I mean, it's not. Like, the rake is still relevant. When you start getting higher than 10-20, then the rake becomes essentially irrelevant. But at 10-20, I still think it is. It does have an effect. So having deeper stacks with having the deeper effective stacks being with the button behind me, I think ace-8 off is going to go into the fold, opening from the cutoff. Fast and furious play from Bit Too Easy. So big blind bets goes for the large 4-bet size. He even started the hand, I think, under 100 big blinds, so it's even more effectively of a large size. That wasn't good English speaking, was it? So I think cutoff should play 1/3 or check. Yeah, and he goes for the 1/3. Maybe at the reduced stack sizes, like 1/4 check is better. Versus the size on table 2, we fold. Okay, yeah, jamming makes sense with hands like jacks and 10s from button. Not much else though. Maybe a hand like ace-5. 6s, yeah. Yeah, I don't know exactly actually. It can't be bad. Like, there's no way it could be bad, and there's the reduced stack size as well. And then, yeah, ace king just has to call because it has the right price to call at that point. I didn't think there was a lot of jamming with the lower pairs on this board. But button versus cutoff, it actually makes a decent amount of sense. There's a lot of worse hands that you can get called by sixes as well, not to mention the crazy amount of protection you get from hands like that fold, like king jack, king 10. You can get called by hands like ace 4 suited, ace 5, ace king. So yeah, how bad could it be? Nice little line from Davey here. Going for the 10% on the river with pocket kings. Kings without a club must be a very, very low frequency bet on this board in these positions. But it can't be bad. You get floated by so many pairs worse than you, and it's obviously indifferent, so he probably rolled a bet. Turn, I imagine kings is a pure check. And then river, yeah, going for the 10% with kings. Makes a lot of sense. And pocket tens, I think, is close between jamming and calling. Maybe not close between. Maybe we don't have any jams with pocket tens with a 10 of clubs. Definitely not folding though. Actually, now that I think about it, maybe kings without the club on the flop. That's more than I thought. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. It's definitely indifferent. Making some tighter folds on a table, I think that it's dubious whether I could play any sort of profitable game. Really, I should just stop making this video and do something else, but it's too late. I'm already inside. And there's the seat open, so there's always a chance that someone comes and joins us who potentially I could beat. So I think simplifying to a one-size strategy on this turn is completely fine. Like playing half pot or check is completely fine. I think splitting also makes a lot of sense. It's not too crazy to identify which hands want to bet small and which hands want to bet large. Interesting, he just calls versus the 1/3 on the river. I mean, it's reasonable. It's reasonable for sure. It's just the snap just call is interesting. We will check this back some of the time on table 1. We have a lot of hands that want to check back here. I think even playing a larger size or check strategy makes a lot of sense too. We have a lot of hands like Jack 4 suited that want to check back. Weak ace-x that want to check back. Tens that wants to check back. I think the turn we can barrel for half, and I think this hand on a 64 will bet. He picks up king jack, and that's about it. Queen 10 obviously as well, but he doesn't have off combos. Not to mention some of his queen 10 will check raise the flop. And we block queen 10. Now on the river, do we ever like jam to make him indifferent with an ace? We do block queen jack suited. It's a little fancy. It's a little fancy. I'm wondering if we do that. Yeah, it's a little bit too fancy, I think. Lucky river for him. Expect to see a range bet here from Davey for small size. And I expect to see a lot of raises from the cutoff on this board. A lot of folds, a lot of raises, not that many calls. Although being deeper does affect it a little bit. This small raise is interesting. I imagine Bit2Easy is doing it for exploitative reasons because it doesn't make a lot of sense theory-wise. The types of hands you want to raise on this board, none of them are raising small for protection. None of them are raising to, because they're thin value protection raises. And I think that the button does have a lot of elastic continues, so it doesn't, it's not like it generates the same amount of folds as a larger raise would. Like, you don't really want to raise pocket sixes to that small size, do you? However, it might be very hard to defend versus the small size, and maybe Bit2Easy knows how to play subsequent lines, and maybe he thinks that people will overfold or potentially play future streets worse when he takes that raise size instead of a GTO raise size. And maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe I'm just wrong, and that's the right raise size. Who knows, right? Sorry, I had to go get some water, and we're gonna fold on table 2. Getting beat up today. Not actually though. not really losing that much. A board where some players might bet this board too often. There's actually supposed to be a lot of checking on this board, regardless of whatever size that you want to pick. Yeah, that hand seems pretty reasonable by both players. I think big blind plays 1/3, 3/4, something like that scheme, or somewhere, you know, anywhere between like a quarter and also having like a pot size bet. Basically, you want a small bet and a larger bet that's not an overbet as the big blind here, and I think all your king X really wants to go into the size that is larger, especially on the queen river where the button river's a bunch of queen X. Okay, we're gonna call with the pocket fours. I think 2s and 3s and maybe even 4s will get into the check raising range some of the time here. However, it's a very small check raising range on this board. Like, very narrow, I should say. Yeah, I think on a 12 we're gonna fold. If I remember correctly, this hand does all three. However, folding is more likely to be a mistake than anything else, but I'm just gonna fold on a 12. If it's a mistake, I'll just make it a frequency mistake rather than a pure EV mistake. How much longer we got here? Okay, we're gonna go for maybe a few more minutes and I'm gonna call it a video. We get to do a lot of betting on this board. I like his raise size. You don't want to raise too large on this board because you start isolating yourselves to the fact that we have better jack-X than the big blind does. I think having 3 bets on this board is okay, but not really necessary. And regardless, I don't think queens ever wants to 3-bet. And then I imagine on this turn we're going to face a high-frequency 1/3 strategy, or maybe even just a range 1/3 strategy. He does have some hands like 8, 9, 10, 9, or a hand like King 8 of spades. So he has some portion of his range that doesn't smash the turn, but a lot of his raising range on the flop is a jack, a 7, or a heart, and those are all pretty strong hands. I like betting queens without a heart here for a 3rd on the turn. I think on a 26 maybe this should check back, but yeah, we're gonna make this the last 2 hands. I think we have an easy check back now. Yeah. And yeah, that's gonna be it for this video, guys. I will see you in the next one. Take care.